Alright people, fresh off Sham Charania's desk. Now, Lu Dort has just been traded to the Atlanta Hawks. Most fans immediately focus on one thing, right? Atlanta gave up Zaccharie, a former #1 overall pick, a player with enormous upside, and naturally everyone asks, why would you do that? But I don't think this trade was about giving up Zaccharie. I think this trade was about identity. Because if you look at what Atlanta has quietly built over the last year, this roster suddenly makes a lot more sense. Just 1 year ago, the Hawks were built around Trae Young. Everything revolved around offense. And then now, that team does not exist anymore. Atlanta has completely reinvented itself. CJ McCollum is now the veteran leader. Dyson Daniels has become one of the league's best perimeter defenders. Jalen Johnson has developed into an all-star caliber forward. Jonathan Kuminga gives them explosive athleticism, even though he may not be back next year. We'll see. Onyeka Okongwu anchors the middle. Instead of trying to outscore everyone, Atlanta is trying to overwhelm teams with size, versatility, and defense. And that's exactly why Lu Dort makes so much sense. Lu Dort is the missing piece. Every contender has one player that accepts the hardest job. The player nobody wants. Guarding Luka, guarding Anthony Edwards, guarding Jason Tatum, guarding Shea. Lu Dort lives for those assignments. Lu Dort is one of the few defenders in basketball who can legitimately guard positions 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4, right? His strength is elite. His lateral quickness is there. His physicality never changes. And then most importantly, he doesn't need the basketball. And that's huge for Atlanta because this team already has enough players capable of creating offense, right? McCollum can score. Jalen Johnson can initiate offense. Kuminga, even though he comes back, attacks downhill. Buddy Hield spaces the floor. Dort doesn't need touches. He simply fills every role, right? Now imagine playoff basketball. Their opponent has an elite guard, right? You look at the Eastern Conference, the Tyrese Maxeys, the Jalen Brunsons, the Jalen Browns, right? Atlanta starts Dyson Daniels. Put Dyson on him. Now you can put Lu Dort on him. You need size? Jalen Johnson switches. You need rim protection? Okongwu is right there. That's 4 legitimate defenders on the floor simultaneously. Very few teams could match that. And instead of hiding weak defenders, Atlanta is creating defensive nightmares. And that's championship basketball. I'm not saying they're going to get there. I'm just saying that is championship basketball, right? And now the misconception that Lu Dort hurts your offense, right? He simplifies your offense. He's never been a player that dominates possessions. Instead, he cuts hard, sets physical screens, runs in transition, hits open catch and shoot threes when defenses ignore him, and more importantly, his defense creates offense. Every steal becomes a fast break. Every loose ball becomes an easy bucket. Those are possessions Atlanta desperately needed during last year's playoff run. Now, to be fair, giving up Zaccharie isn't nothing, right? Atlanta traded away the player with the highest ceiling in the deal. So if he steps and develops into an all-star in Dallas, people will revisit this trade for years, right? Because wings with his combination of length and shooting don't come around often. And Atlanta knows that. But they simply decided potential wasn't enough. They wanted certainty. And now, Dallas is making the opposite bet. They're betting on the upside. Zaccharie fits perfectly in today's NBA. Long, athletic, two-way potential. He's exactly the type of wing every championship team spends years trying to find. Dallas believes his best basketball is still ahead of him. And if they're right, this trade could age incredibly well for the Dallas Mavericks. And then there's OKC, right? At first glance, receiving 3 second-round picks for a guy like Lu Dort might be But if the currently reported teams are the complete deal, this move appears to be less about draft compensation and more about reshaping the roster and creating flexibility, though additional details could still emerge. The Thunder clearly believe they can replace Dort's production internally or redistribute his role across the roster, right? Because elite point of attack defenders are among the hardest players to find. So that's a bold bet. And so who won? Short term, I'd say Atlanta. They immediately become tougher, more versatile, much harder to score against. They've built one of the most switchable defensive lineups in the Eastern Conference. Long term, Dallas might have the highest upside, right? If if Zaccharie develops into the player scouts envisioned, this trade could completely change the Mavericks' future. OKC remains the biggest question mark. Their evaluation depends on what comes next and whether this move is part of a larger plan. Because you trade away Lu Dort, and I know everybody didn't like Lu Dort, and he might not seem as important, but when you have a Western Conference filled to the brim with guards, you need those defensive guys, right? Going up against the Spurs, De'Aaron Fox, Dylan Harper, Castle, Vassell, you got Jamal Murray, you have Stephen Curry still. Like, you're filled to the brim with guards. So those perimeter defenders are very useful. And so the Hawks didn't trade for more offense. They traded for playoff basketball. They traded for toughness, for physicality, for a player who embraces the hardest defensive assignments every single night, right? And that's Lu Dort. Atlanta has spent the last year changing its identity. And then with Lu Dort, that transformation might just be complete. So we'll see how this works out. But I like it. I love it for Atlanta. Go defense, go defense, go defense. For years and years and years, it was Trae Young, offense, push the ball, yada, yada, yada. Now they're completely changing what they look like, right? Now we have maybe Detroit in Atlanta, right? They're going for that kind of identity. Just straight defense. Bully ball. And that's important. So, the Knicks, y'all got to watch out. Y'all got to watch out. Everybody got to watch out.